Welcome back. Joining us now to talk about legal challenges to the Trump agenda is Mike Davis. He is founder and president of the Article 3 Project. Mike, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So tell us about your mission at the Article 3 Project and how you're funded.
Yeah, I started the Article 3 Project after the Kavanaugh confirmation proceeding, where I served as the chief counsel for nominations on the Senate Judiciary Committee to Chairman Chuck Grassley, the all-star senator from Iowa, who is President Trump's biggest and most effective ally in Congress in both President Trump's first and second term. I hope people remember that. So I started the Article 3 Project in 2019 after I saw what the Democrats were capable of when they threw these bogus allegations against Justice Kavanaugh. It continued their playbook that they used against Bork and Clarence Thomas, and now Amy Coney, a new judge on the Third Circuit, just confirmed last night. My funding comes largely, it came largely from me. I funded a lot of it through my own pocketbook, but we also take donations at Article3Project.org, article number 3project.org. We are very pleased to get small donations, but only what people can afford to give.
There's a website called judicialsabotage.org. Is that your website?
It is. Article 3 Project launched that website. We've done several of these websites in the past. We've done websites on women and minority judicial nominees, how Democrats pretend they want diversity and then they viciously attack and smear women and minority judicial nominees from Republican presidents. We've had a judiciary tracker in the past, and I think we still have that up now for that shows the pace of President Trump's judicial nominations in his first term and now his second term, where Chairman Chuck Grassley helped President Trump confirm a record number of judges in his first term. We have this judicial sabotage tracker that shows how these activist judges are around the country are ignoring the will of the American people, actually sabotaging the will of the American people by unlawfully trying to strike down the president in his exercise of his core Article 2 powers.
Now, Mike, you are tracking, your organization's tracking over 250 legal cases. What do you see as the most significant ones that you're watching most closely?
Well, I think that we have to step back and remember what our Constitution is. Our Constitution is a loan agreement between we the people and our governments, federal, state, local, tribal governments. And it's radically different from Great Britain, from which we escaped. In Great Britain, the king or queen is sovereign. They get their sovereign power from God, and then they lend power to their subjects through documents like the Magna Carta. America is radically different. We the people are the sovereign in America. We get sovereign power from God, and we loan power to our governments, federal, state, and local, through the loan agreement called our U.S. Constitution. And our Constitution is very clear. The Congress has all legislative power under Article 1. The president has all executive power under Article 2. And our federal judiciary, the Supreme Court and the lower federal courts, have all judicial power under Article 3. And the federal government only has powers that we the people specifically give it in our Constitution. Specific powers, enumerated powers, and then those powers are divided between Congress, the president, and the Supreme Court. And all other power belongs to we the people, the states and we the people, as confirmed by the 10th Amendment. And so what we are really focusing on at the Article 3 Project during President Trump's first term, not only are we focusing on judges, we helped confirm Amy Coney 50-49 last night in the Senate when a lot of people said that he had no chance. We had 3,000 people make over 10,000 contacts with their home state senators and gave these senators an attitude adjustment. But what we're really focusing on...
Well, explain that, Mike. The attitude adjustment, what do you say when you call the senators?
We have our people call these senators and say that Emil Bove, Judge Emil Bove, now circuit judge, federal circuit judge Emil Bove on the Third Circuit in New Jersey is very well qualified for this job. Even the American Bar Association conceded that Emil Bove was qualified for this job. He's bold. He's fearless. He's going to fight for the Constitution like he fought for President Trump's constitutional rights as President Trump's defense attorney during the lawfare, like Emil Bove fought for Americans' constitutional rights when he served in a senior Justice Department official and fired the bad actors in the Justice Department who politicized, weaponized, persecuted Americans when he dropped lawsuits where they were persecuting Americans and when he opened investigations and brought accountability, much needed accountability for people who persecuted Americans. So those are the people who the Article 3 project are going to strongly recommend and defend.
And Mike, just going back to Emil Bove, as you mentioned, he was confirmed last night by the U.S. Senate. This is the Hill. Bove vote dogged by new whistleblower complaints. There are 3 whistleblowers, as you may know, on Emil Bove, alleging that he had encouraged lawyers to disregard judicial rulings. And what do you make of those? Do you, I mean, what do you think of those complaints by the whistleblowers?
It kind of reminded me, the Emil Bove confirmation process kind of reminded me of the Justice Kavanaugh justice process that I ran as the chief counsel for nominations for then and now Chairman Chuck Grassley, where they brought 6 late, bogus, unsubstantiated allegations against Kavanaugh late in the process. After the first hearing, on the eve of the confirmation votes, it seemed like a political drive-by shooting back then because there was no substantiation whatsoever, and actually we made criminal referrals against several of those accusers. It feels the same way against Emil Bove. Emil Bove clearly has the highest ethical standards because otherwise the American Bar Association, not exactly a conservative organization, a pretty Democrat organization, gave Emil Bove its highest rating. And so in order for the ABA to give Emil Bove his highest rating, that means he has to have the highest ethical standards, which he does. And so these allegations are bogus, they're nonsense. And now, fortunately, Emil Bove will be a federal appellate judge for the rest of his life.
And this is CNN. Another whistleblower claims that top DOJ official suggested department could ignore court orders. That's about Emil Bove, Judge Emil Bove, as you mentioned.
Did CNN say who that whistleblower was, or was that an anonymous whistleblower?
There is a whistleblower named. I would have to find that for you. Maybe our producer can do that while we continue our conversation. Sure. There have been, in the last 6 months, the Washington Times reports that President Trump has lost 75% of federal cases challenging his executive orders, his executive actions, I should say. What do you make of that, that streak, if you will?
Well, he has a very good streak at the Supreme Court of the United States, where he's winning monumental cases before the Supreme Court on the president's core Article 2 powers. And I want to congratulate Attorney General Pam Bondi, Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, Chief of Staff Chad Mizell, Solicitor General John Sauer, and so many others in the Trump 47 Justice Department, along with White House counsel David Warrington and his team. They are winning monumental wins at the Supreme Court, defining the president's core Article 2 power of the Constitution. What we have is the American people elected President Trump with a broad electoral mandate, 312 electoral votes, all 7 swing states, the popular vote. President Trump kept the House. He won a comfortable margin in the Senate, and the American people gave President Trump a mandate to secure our border, to expel illegal aliens, particularly violent criminals and terrorists, and to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. And President Trump is doing the unthinkable in Washington. He's actually doing what he promised American voters he would do. He is not stealing Congress's Article one power, legislative power under the Constitution. He is not stealing the judiciary's Article 3 power under the Constitution. He is exercising core Article 2 power as the commander-in-chief to secure our border and repel an invasion, as the chief executive officer. And he's taking care that our laws are faithfully executed, including rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. And these Democrat activist judges around the country, particularly in judicial hellholes like Washington, D.C., are sabotaging not just President Trump, but the American people, the will of the American people and our sovereignty. And it's unacceptable. And the Supreme Court is siding with President Trump in almost all of these cases. I think it's like 15 out of 17 cases so far.
And if you'd like to join our conversation with Mike Davis, he'll be with us for just under 30 minutes. You can call us. 202-748-8000 is for Democrats, 202-748-8001 for Republicans, and 202-748-8002 for Independents. You can also text us if you'd like. That number is 202-748-8003. And just to circle back, Mike, on the whistleblower, that is Erez Ruveni. That CNN article does name him. He was a former DOJ attorney in the Office of Immigration Litigation. And his quote is, "I think it would be incredibly dangerous for someone like that to have a lifetime appointment as a federal appellate judge." He worked on the case of the mistakenly deported immigrant Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He was fired after admitting in court that that was an administrative mistake. So there is a named whistleblower. But I want to ask you about...
It sounds like this guy's disgruntled because he got fired because he violated his ethical duties as an attorney and revealed internal client conversations to the court. That would get you fired. And this guy sounds like he has horrifying judgment.
No, I don't think it was client conversations. It was that he was the one that said, yes, it was an administrative error to have deported Mr. Abrego Garcia.
So he admitted in courts fault for his client without his client's consent. That sounds like an ethical problem for that attorney.
His client being the United States government.
Yes. So it sounds like this guy should have been fired, and maybe that's why he's disgruntled.
I want to ask you about the idea of flooding the zone. We had Ankush Kadori on this program on Monday. He's a senior Politico magazine writer, and he talked about he suggested that the Trump administration was essentially taking these controversial actions knowing that they would be challenged in court. I'll play it for you and then have you respond.
The Trump administration has taken a particular strategy upon entering office, which is to move very quickly and very expansively and aggressively on a host of fronts, violating quite a few laws that are on the books that were written by Congress. I'll give you just one example, which is he was supposed to provide notice to Congress before he dismissed any of the inspectors general. They deliberately did not do that. That's a very low-hanging example of violating statutory law. And yes, it does appear to be the case that they then draw the lawsuit and then kind of see how it plays out, and some of it gets upheld, some of it doesn't. It is a very, very unusual strategy coming from the executive branch. It's unlike anything I've seen, at least during my lifetime. Usually, when you have an administration pushing all of these things so aggressively, we would regard that as sort of politically unpalatable.
Mike, your response to that?
I know Ankush. I've talked to him before. He was a former federal prosecutor in the Justice Department. I would just say this, that the president has power under Article 2 of the Constitution, separate from what any statute tries to restrict. The president can hire and fire any executive branch employee, particularly any officer. He does not need permission from anyone to do it. He does not need permission from Congress in particular. And there is recourse for people who are fired. If you're a fired employee, you can go to the Merit Systems Protection Board and file a claim. If you're a fired federal contractor, you can go to the Court of Federal Claims and get recourse there. But this idea that activist judges can tell the president of the United States who he can hire and fire is a clear violation of Article 2 of the Constitution, no matter what statute that Congress passed.
Here's Carol in Tucson, Arizona. Line for Democrats. Carol, you're on with Mike Davis.
Hello, Mr. Davis. You know, the one thing I have a hard time in trying to have a conversation with people like you, meaning people who who basically lie. And, you know, it's just so hard to convey any kind of good conversation because you keep spouting all this false information that creates a society pear-shaped.
Like what, Carol? Can you be more specific about what you believe he's lying about?
Well, this gentleman, this judge, this guy is nothing but bad news. He's tainted by his beliefs as opposed to following the law. And I don't know how much worse you can get for a judge to be with that kind of he has that kind of power, and he'll be able to rule however he wants, but it'll be based on not law but his beliefs.
All right.
And
do you have a response, Mike, for Carol?
I do, and this is exactly why Democrats do what they do. This is why they smear judicial nominees like Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who they falsely accused of running a serial gang rape ring as a teenager, completely bogus allegations. This is why they smear good people like Judge Amy Bove, because these Democrats know that they have low information voters like that woman who was just on your show, and it's easy to convince them that something bad happened because they're ignorant.
We have a text for you from Chris in Birmingham, Alabama. He says, I recently saw Mike Davis on a Frontline documentary, and he talked about the importance of having Trump as an imperial executive. Can he please explain what it is and why he thinks the president has that authority?
I don't think I used the word imperial executive. I think I talked about how the president has the executive power under Article 2 of the Constitution. That's not imperial. That's what our founders put in the Constitution. The Democrats say that it's some sort of theory that the president has Article 2 power under the Constitution, and maybe they should try to amend the Constitution if they don't like that the president is the chief executive officer with the executive power.
Here's David, Corpus Christi, Texas, Republican. You're on the air, David.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. I have one question about this fabulous wall that's being built on our southern border. In 2018, there was over 300 tunnels found in California alone. Recently, there was one found in Arizona. I think there's been a couple here in Texas. What does this wall do to prevent a Mexican citizen with a shovel digging under it, or the cartel with all of their heavy equipment digging tunnels that are a mile long? Why are we spending billions of dollars to build something that doesn't work? Thank you for your time.
Any comment on that, Mike Davis? I know that's probably not your field.
Well, I would say if walls don't work, why does Barack Obama and Joe Biden have a wall around their house? Why don't they tear down those walls? Why does Hillary Clinton have a wall around her house if walls don't work?
Frank in Utah, Line for Independence. Good morning.
Good morning. My question today is all about January 6th. It seems like the Republicans have no problem with January 6th, where they went in and ransacked the Capitol. And yet President Trump comes along and pardons every one of them after the courts have convicted them, spent millions and millions of dollars convicting these people, and now they're all out walking around doing whatever they're doing. And it seems to me that you are one of the many Dutch uncles for President Trump. You just can't say enough good about him. On the Democrat side, which I don't care for either, is they don't have Dutch uncles speaking up for them. They have to go out and fight individually to stop this would-be king, Trump, from taking over our Constitution and actually rewriting it along with all of the Republican elected officials behind him. I think we're headed for a Thank you.
Mike Davis.
Yeah, I've always said that January 6th was a bad day. It was a lawful protest that devolved into a riot. It was not an insurrection because no one was charged with insurrection. But what the Democrats did, what the Biden Justice Department did, is there were three categories of people there. There were people who were there outside, and even if you think they're wrong, even if you think they're crazy, they have a First Amendment right to express their views. There were people who trespassed, who should have been charged with trespass, and there were people who were violent, who should have been charged more harshly. But what the Biden Justice Department did is they lumped everyone together and they persecuted them under a post-Enron obstruction of justice statute that had nothing to do with January 6th, as the Supreme Court ruled in the Fisher ruling after the fact, many years after the facts, and they destroyed these people's lives for many, many years. A lot of these people went to prison without pretrial release. Many of these people lost their jobs, lost their families, went bankrupt, even killed themselves. Family members killed themselves, all for a case where there was no insurrection, where the Supreme Court said that they were overcharged with that post-Enron obstruction of justice standard. At the same time that the Biden Justice Department is going after January 6th defendants, Trump supporters, the Biden Justice Department turned a blind eye to the much more deadly and destructive BLM and Antifa writers who caused $2 billion in damage, who destroyed American cities, who killed a dozen people. So when Democrats start crying about BLM and Antifa writers, I'll start crying about January 6th writers. And so I very publicly advocated that President Trump should pardon almost all of those January 6th defendants, except for the worst ones. He should commute those sentences because they have suffered enough. They were persecuted.
Jim is a Democrat in Illinois. You're on. Good morning, Jim.
Yes, good morning. I've been on juries before. I've been on federal and civil, and I take that very serious. So I really try to stay out of politics because I've been on these cases, and you're affecting people's lives. So what bothers me about the system now is I watched the Judicial Senate subcommittee vote unanimous for that bovine guy. He hasn't even been a judge yet. I don't even know how he rules on objections. He gets unanimous vote. It goes in the Senate. They get a 50 to 46 passing of it. It wasn't even like 80 to 20. Can you explain that? When I tell the judge that, like, is he going to let me go? Or is he going to say, are you a Democrat?
I mean, Amy Bove got rated as well qualified by the American Bar Association, which is a Democrat organization. Amy Bove is clearly qualified to serve as a federal judge. He was a clerk for 2 federal judges, including on a court of appeals. He graduated from Georgetown Law School at the top of his class. He was a federal prosecutor for many years, including terrorism cases in the Southern District of New York, which is a very high-profile district in the country, probably the most high-profile. He's been a high-profile defense attorney. He's been a high-profile, high-ranking Justice Department official. He's the number 2 to the number 2 in the Justice Department. So he's clearly qualified to serve as a federal judge, as the American Bar Association said. And I would remind people that Justice Elena Kagan, who is a Supreme Court justice, was never a judge before she got put on the Supreme Court.
Mike, I want to play Senator Dick Durbin. He was on the floor of the Senate talking about Amy Bove and why Democrats are objecting to him. This was before the vote. Here it is.
Mr. Bove's disdain for the rule of law has been a theme throughout his entire career. As a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, he once admitted that prosecutors he supervised told the defense team, quote, flat lie regarding their disclosure obligations. Flat out lie. Given that background, it appears that Mr. Bovey's time in the Trump administration has been true to form. Last month, Erez Ravini, a career DOJ attorney who defended the first Trump administration's administrative policies in court, filed a whistleblower complaint with my office. According to Mr. Ravini, Mr. Bovey told other department attorneys that they might need to say, quote, F you, close quote, to federal courts that issued orders which the Trump administration had disagreed with. Remarkably, when he was under oath before the Judiciary Committee, Mr. Bovey would not deny that he had delivered such a message. He merely said he did not recall whether he had used the epithet that I characterized, the explicit language. So I asked Mr. Ravini, the whistleblower, to substantiate his claims, and he did. Mr. Ravini provided text messages, emails, and a trove of other documents corroborating his claim that Mr. Bovey had both suggested the possibility of violating court orders and had spearheaded efforts to mislead judges.
Mike Davis, your response to that?
It's nonsense, and it's not Mr. Amel Bovey anymore. It's Judge Amel Bovey, because the Senate considered these allegations. They did not find them credible, and they voted to confirm him last night. I would also say this, remember this, with this Judge Jeb Boasberg. This is what this case is all about. This D.C. Obama Judge Jeb Boasberg. Let me tell you what he did in this case. President Trump was expelling the most dangerous terrorist in the Western Hemisphere. And when those planes were in the air, Judge Boasberg opened up his courtroom on a Saturday when it was not even his duty weekend. So I don't know how he thought that it was he could do that. He opened up his courtroom in Washington, D.C. He did not have jurisdiction to do this. The jurisdiction would be in the Southern District of Texas, but that didn't stop Jeb Boasberg. He ordered the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, to turn around planes during an ongoing military operation, right? You can't do that as a federal judge, right? The recourse for these deported terrorists would be to file a habeas petition. It's not to have an activist judge open up his courtroom, expose an ongoing military operation, and turn around military planes during the operation. That is very illegal by this judge, and it's very dangerous to our national security. This Jeb Boasberg did not know the fuel levels of these planes when they were over the Gulf of America. Jeb Boasberg did not know the security footprints in America if we turned around these planes with the most dangerous terrorists. We saw the security footprints in El Salvador when we saw hundreds of law enforcement, intel, and military officials ready to accept these dangerous terrorists. And whether you agree or disagree with whether President Trump should have put those terrorists on those planes, I absolutely agree. He had the constitutional duty to do it as commander-in-chief. But regardless of that, a judge does not get to go sabotage a military operation, especially when he has no jurisdiction, no power to do it. And so, yes, I have very publicly said, when you have an order like this that is so lawless and so dangerous to our national security that puts American and allied lives in danger, the President of the United States has a constitutional duty to ignore these lawless orders and dangerous orders like this. And I don't say that lightly. I've not said that about any other judge's order. And let me also say this, Jeb Boasberg.
No, James Boasberg, sir. James Boasberg.
Yeah, he goes by, his name is Jeb.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So Jeb Boasberg, I've never said this about any other judge. He deserves to be impeached for this, because what he did was so lawless and so dangerous to our national security, and he refused to back down even when he was reversed on appeal.
So Attorney General Pam Bondi has put this on X. She said, today at my direction, the Justice Department filed a misconduct complaint against U.S. District Court Judge James Boasberg for making impropers about President Trump and his administration. These comments have undermined the integrity of the judiciary, and we will not stand for that. Apparently, she believes that the misconduct was about comments and not about endangering U.S. national security, as you have stated.
Well, that's a separate misconduct allegation that the Attorney General's made, and she's absolutely right. Jeb Boasberg was at a judicial conference of the judicial leaders around the country, and he essentially plotted that there was going to be a constitutional crisis with President Trump, and these judges need to step up and stop this constitutional crisis. That is highly inappropriate for judges to have those conversations like that.
Do you not consider it a constitutional crisis for, as you just outlined, the president or the Justice Department to essentially say to a judge's order, quote, F you?
So it's remarkable that Jeb Boasberg talked about that constitutional crisis that had not yet happened. And then Jeb Boasberg made sure that that constitutional crisis happened when he ran into his courtroom on a Saturday when it was not his duty docket, when he did not have jurisdiction, when the D.C. federal court did not have jurisdiction, the Southern District of Texas had jurisdiction, and somehow Jeb Boasberg got tipped off by these plaintiffs that this was happening, that these flights were leaving. And Jeb Boasberg judges normally wear robes, not capes, but Jeb Boasberg was a narcissistic superhero that day and threw on his cape and ran into his courtroom and thought he was going to save terrorists from President Trump, from being deported from President Trump. You have to ask yourself, that sounds pretty premeditated to me, especially when he forecast what he's doing among his fellow judges at a judicial conference. So maybe the Attorney General Pam Bondi's right that this Jeb Boasberg committed misconduct.
On the line for Republicans in Connecticut, Diana, you're on the air.
Thank you. Yes, I have two comments. One has to do with the Supreme Court when it was all Democrats, because the Democrats keep calling in criticizing Trump. But when the Supreme Court was all Democrats, they passed all these laws that were Democratic policies. And I remember saying to my husband, why do we have policies in our country, the Democratic policies? He said, well, that's because the Democrats are in charge of the Supreme Court. Isn't the purpose of the Supreme Court to see whether or not the laws are lawful, but not to make? I remember Steve Scalise says we're going to do it the right way now. Our job is not to make laws. Our job is to see whether or not the laws are okay. And but up until then, we had same-sex marriage was a law. This was a law. This was a law by the Democrats, and it was all their liberal policies. My other question has to do with the Russian collusion between Clinton, Obama, and Russia. When Trump was in office, how they tried to conspire to say that he was being influenced by Russia, and everything. They tried to impeach him with this, and Clinton was the mastermind of this whole thing, even though Obama followed along. And
all right, Diana, go ahead, Mike.
I'm just happy a Republican finally got through on the Republican line. And let me say this, Diane's exactly right. So judges have a modest but crucial role, and that is to decide cases and controversies of the parties properly before the court with redressable claims. That is their Article 3 standing under the Constitution for judges. That's their Article 3 power. So nothing more, nothing less. When judges think that they write the laws, like these activist judges have done for so many years before Trump transformed the Supreme Court to the first constitutionalist majority in 90 years, the Democrats cheered this on. But now that the Supreme Court actually follows the law, the Democrats want to dox the justices, go outside of their homes and protest, obstruct justice by protesting them, and even try to get them killed with 1 a.m. assassination attempts after other justices go to safe houses. So, yeah, I think Republicans and Democrats treat the judicial system a little bit differently. Let's go to Crossfire Hurricane. I've been saying this for 3 years since the Mar-a-Lago raid. This is the biggest scandal in American history. President Obama, Vice President Biden, the Attorney General, FBI Director Comey, the CIA director Brennan, the DNI director Clapper, so many others in the Obama administration politicized and weaponized law enforcement and intel agencies to help Hillary's campaign and to hurt President Trump's campaign. And they continue to hurt President Trump's presidency. They hobbled his presidency. And the whole point of the Mar-a-Lago raid was to go get back those damning Crossfire hurricane records that President Trump declassified and may have took when he left office. And so, as I've been saying for 3 years, I hope these lawfare Democrats lawyer up, because justice is definitely coming under Attorney General Pam Bondi. She has a backbone of steel, along with Todd Blanche and Chad Mizell and Stanley Woodward and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and Harmeet Dillon and so many other good Trump officials in the Justice Department. So these lawfare Democrats better lawyer up.
Patty in Wellsboro, Pennsylvania, line for Democrats. Good morning.
Good morning, Mimi. Nice to speak with you. Sorry I'm calling in while you got this fellow here on the air. So, Mr. Davis, first of all, I'd like to address just quickly a couple comments. 7 people were convicted of seditious conspiracy. That's sedition. It failed. They didn't succeed. They planned it. They tried. 7 people were convicted of seditious conspiracy. The folks who were held without bond were held because they were deemed dangerous to the community. Get that out of the way. The second thing is what you're talking about with Judge Boasberg. I don't know, maybe you don't really understand the way the process works when the plaintiffs file complaints. I'm not sure. Don't really have much of a question for you. What I would like to address is, Mimi, I'm really sorry that you were the one with having this guy on. C-SPAN, it's just really disappointing. There are folks out there. You could be educating yourselves, talking to experts on what authoritarian slide looks like. And that's where we are. We are in a constitutional crisis. Giving a platform, elevating, and giving credibility to fascists is dangerous.
All right, Patty. Any comment on that, Mike?
I would say this: if these Trump supporters were trying to overthrow the government, why did they go into the nation's capital unarmed? Right? I think January 6th.
Are you saying there were no weapons at January 6th?
Well,
no firearms?
Did they catch them in the Capitol? I didn't see that. I would say, why did they go into the nation's capital unarmed? And when they got to the Senate floor of the nation's capital, they walked through velvet ropes and followed police direction. I say January 6th, again, was a lawful protest that devolved into a riot. And the Biden administration, President Biden and his Justice Department, politicized and weaponized that against Trump and his supporters. And that is very clear by the Supreme Court's ruling in the Fisher decision, when the Supreme Court held that the Biden Justice Department persecuted these defendants with a post-Enron obstruction of justice charge 1512 that does not apply to them.
And Mike, we're running out of time, but I wanted to ask you about this Time Magazine article where you're quoted in it about preparations for the next Supreme Court nominee. You have a list put together. I'm not going to ask you who's on that list, but I will ask you, how is that list different than the ones that were on the first list? So Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, Justice Gorsuch. How is this list going to be fundamentally different from President Trump's first term?
Well, I have breaking news. I'm definitely going to add federal appellate judge Amel Bovee to President Trump's Supreme Court list, because he is exactly the type of judge I want on the federal bench. Someone who is bold, someone who is fearless, someone who is willing to fight for the Constitution no matter what it means for them personally. And so I think that's exactly the type of judge we need. People, that's why they have lifetime tenure. That's why they have pay protection, because they're supposed to stand up for the Constitution. President Trump's biggest and most consequential accomplishment of his first term was the transformation of the Supreme Court and the lower federal courts. President Trump is going to build on that accomplishment in his second term with even more bold and fearless judges like Amy Bovey.
All right, Mike Davis, founder and president of Article 3 Project. They're on the web at article3project.org. Thanks so much for joining us today.